What's good, people? It is your host, Jesse Moore, aka J Moore05, and welcome to the Fantasy Lowdown Show. I wanted to kind of do a little bit something different this week because we're hitting week 13. It's the bye apocalypse week. We have a doozy of teams on a bye. Just to give you a refresher, we have Baltimore, we have Buffalo, we have Vegas, we have the Giants, we have a key amount of 6 total teams on a bye week this week, right? And as teams are making a push for the playoffs, this week is incredibly important. So I know we talked about it early in like the beginning of the season where, week 13 is not that bad. Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. There's a lot of key players. And what I wanted to get at is to really focus on the truly elite players, not necessarily from a value standpoint, because we're talking about this in dynasty format, but the guys that are quote unquote league breakers that are single-handedly winning you weeks. And ideally, if you're stacking multiple guys together on that team of yours, you're winning your league. Like, this is how you get those true difference makers. That's how you go about it. So we have been doing some video clips of individual players. I wanted to go at a broader approach this week and not focus on individual players because a lot of you are coming up against your trade deadline if you have not already hit your trade deadline. So, don't get me started on trade deadlines in Dynasty. I don't think there should be one. If people want to make the push and go on, like, that's their choice. They live with the consequences of that choice after this year, right? I get both sides of the argument, but for me, a lot of them seem like they are the week of playoffs. So we have this week, and then we have week 14 before playoffs start. So you have 2 weeks really to make that push into getting these elite players. So this is what I wanted to focus on this week, and in particular, I'm sure you noticed the players we're going to talk about. Like, we're going to talk about the true difference makers. So that means the Jalen Hurts, the Josh Allens, the Christian McCaffreys, the Tyreek Hills, the Keenan Allens, those type of players, right? That are just, you have them in your lineup, you're getting a massive advantage each week. For instance, I had a team with, was it Allen and Hurts, I think I had? And they just absolutely steamrolled the competition because that magical Sunday night game, they both went off. It was like 80 plus points. They were the top scoring players of that week. And it wasn't looking promising going into the week, but like playing with those two players, you have such an advantage. You're just like, you feel like you were in any game. Like, their floor is super high. The ceiling cases what they had last week it's bonkers, right? So this is what I want to talk about. So I wanted to bring up WAR. So this is wins above replacement. If you're not familiar with WAR, what it is, it's just strictly it's wins above player. So it's this player, how many quote unquote wins over a replacement player does that individual player give you? So obviously, we're going to hit on the scoring format. It is your traditional 12-team start 10 Superflex league, right? So that means you're starting 120 players. Each team has a potential start 2 quarterbacks. Most do start 2 quarterbacks, but realistically, I wanted to hit on this and show you. So there's no bonuses. It's PPR, 1-point PPR. There's no tight end premium. There's no rushing bonuses. No, this is like your just traditional, like almost like redraft, but just with Superflex at 6 point. So the only thing is it's 6 point. I like 6 point because I think it more adequately reflects the good passers in the league, right? If you're passing for a lot of touchdowns, it kind of evens out the Konami cheat code a little bit. So as we dive into this, as you can see here, you can see just how the scoring goes and how it shapes. The left-hand side, the wins above replacement, we have wins above replacement on the left-hand side. The positional rank, so obviously top left is the best players. And if you're curious about this, use Dynasty Daddy. Go into their league settings and select your league. So if you load your username on Sleeper, you can pick all of your individual leagues. So if you have a unique scoring format, it's going to change these values here. So here's the trade value chart on Keep Trade Cut. We'll get on in a second. But what it does is just it gives you how valuable these players are in your individual league. So I thought this was very important to kind of break it down because as we dive into more of this data where we realize how valuable these individual players are, you want as many of them as possible. I know people have depth and they talk about like, oh yeah, I have like a bunch of these young elite like wide receivers. But if you have like a Devonta Smith, a T. Higgins, a Brandon Ayuk, like these guys are great for value, but for impacting your lineup on a consistent basis and helping you get wins, they're not really doing much of anything for you. So this is kind of, we got so into the weeds with like youth that we kind of forgetting like, hey, it's about winning championships, right? And for instance, we'll talk about one of the best veteran producers, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, those two guys. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is a much more expensive version of those guys. But they're single-handedly, like, they're carrying squads for you. And they were dirt cheap this offseason. And this is what I'm talking about. We'll get into it with their actual trade values, right? So for instance, as you can see up here, so you see the QB, that's green. That's the top quarterbacks are the most important. So if you have Josh Allen, he's worth almost 2 WAR over a random, just a replacement level quarterback. The next highest ranked player is Tyreek Hill. So as you can see, it's PPR scoring. He gets a boost. No surprise, the next highest ranked player is Christian McCaffrey at 1.71 WAR. And then we get Jalen Hurts right there. And then Keenan Allen, and it kind of goes down a little bit. You'll notice how there's a massive drop from McCaffrey to running back 2. That's Raheem Mostert. So it's pretty crazy to think about, right? McCaffrey is such an advantage over the competition. Like, I think he's the biggest advantage in this league. So if you have McCaffrey in this league, you have the biggest advantage because you're going from almost a full 0.7 points of WAR over the second place running back. That's absurd. Like, you can't touch that, right? So it may think like, oh yeah, Allen's the most valuable player. Technically in a vacuum he is, but when you look at it on team context, you really realize that, oh, hey, guess what? Actually, I think McCaffrey's a bigger edge, even though he doesn't give you the same amount of WAR. So this is the cool stuff to look at. And I know this is like where I get into the data and it's a little nerdy stuff, but this is what makes your league. When you see this data in your Facebook context, you're like, oh, guess what? These guys are incredibly important. Like, they make a massive difference. Now you notice it's not tight end premium scoring, right? So we look at where are we at? Sorry, I lost page. We have TJ Hawkins. He's actually past Travis Kelce. TJ Hawkins is the most valuable tight end, but look at the gap from your QB1, your running back 1, your wide receiver 1. It's a massive gap. Now I actually have Kelce in this league, and it's great, and I feel fantastic about him, but he's nowhere near giving the edge he gave you last year. And we'll go down the list a little bit. So you see how these are the top players in WAR. You can go WAR per game. It's pretty cool to look at because the WAR per game is going to give you guys that are injured. So you'll see guys like Kyron Williams. He's a starter. He jumps in here. Guys that haven't played the full amount of games, but they're still giving you massive impact like on the season. So like if you want to look at it on a per game basis, you can shuffle a little bit here. You go down, you find guys. You're like, oh, look at that. Justin Jefferson. Per game basis, he was fantastic. CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert. Now, they're not giving you the 0.16 that Tyreek Hill is. So, like, in an individual game perspective, Tyreek Hill is, like, been the best with his averages. Just, if you want to look overall complex, it's Josh Allen. So, we'll go back. Overall, these are the least effective players in the league. So, if you're starting any of these players, like Trent Sherfield, different days, it's a rough situation, obviously. But, like, these give you the guys that have the biggest impact in the league. If you look to the right of what we're looking at trade value. You see how certain guys, Jalen Hurts has a massive trade value. Look at the trade value for Keenan Allen. And this gets into these old wide receivers who don't hold value, but they just produce. Keenan Allen's been just elite with this scoring. Another guy right down here, Sam Howell. He's putting up really good numbers for you. He just doesn't hold the name cachet and the value cachet. So, interestingly enough, if you look on the right-hand side of this chart, right, this is the trade value versus WAR. So we have WAR on the left-hand side of the graph. At the bottom, we have keep trade cut value. So, like, obviously, the most valuable players are on the right-hand side. They're going to be the farthest right. The most valuable guys are top left. So you want guys that are in this, like, ideally this middle ground. Right here, most valuable player, Josh Allen. The most expensive player, it's actually Patrick Mahomes. And Mahomes has been a little bit of a letdown. He has not been as valuable, so you see that's why he's a tier below. It's fun to look at because here's McCaffrey right here. The next closest running back is Mostert. So that's a pretty big jump, right? You see that? And then you see how tight ends, really, like, it's nice to have the elite tight ends, but they're not making that big of a difference. Because it's not tight end premium, you're not getting that super boost. So you might think, like, hey, might have to pivot off of Kelce, might have to pivot off Hawkinson, and to move another one of these elite wide receivers or quarterbacks or anything like that, right? Obviously, you don't want to trade down too far, because if you're going down too far, you're going to lose out. Because if you're just in this cluster down here of these Bellingers, these Noah fans, these Parham guys, like, they're not doing anything for you. So you have to be careful of what you're trading yourself into. But this is really just in team context and a league context. Like, this is the best way to look at values. And I've noticed more people are talking about WAR in general, and how important it is. And I'm noticing, like, our dynasty, we're shifting a little bit towards that, where, excuse me, I saw Ray G put out a tweet. He goes, I don't even do dynasty rankings anymore. He's like, why does it matter? Why does it matter what you're ranking your wide receiver 18? Because that guy's not making impact for you, right? Like, who cares if you have Brandon Ayuk wide receiver 18 or you have T. Higgins wide receiver 18? Because from a production standpoint, they're not really impacting you. And dynasty has done this weird thing where the values the last couple of years have shifted into we want to like win now. We don't want patient. We don't want 2 to 3 year rebuilds. We talk about 1 year punt rebuilds, but realistically, nobody wants to do 2 to 3 year rebuilds. Like that's too long, right? So everyone wants to immediately win, along with having that production. So you kind of have to pick and choose where you're going to go with this, right? And this is league dependent, obviously. The way I play Dynasty is like I view leagues as water. I will go with what the league does not value. So if the league values youth, it like heavily goes youth. I'm gonna have an older team. If the team values older players, they start drafting those earlier guys. I'm gonna chase youth. Like I'm trying to find like veteran edges and these little areas to like nibble at to give myself more valuable team production. Like, so I'll have certain teams that are quote unquote all in, right? Where they are legit just are we are missing, a particular youthful players. We have a lot more old guys. On the flip side, I'll have a lot of young teams on the same side where it's draft capital. And but the majority of my teams have a nice mix of older players, some younger players. We have a decent amount of draft capital where we can use that draft capital to make a push. But realistically, like I want a few hammers on each of my teams. Like I want some team with a Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill. I want a team with Josh Allen and Travis Kelce. Like I want a couple of teams with a few of those guys at minimum. And some of them are older. I really don't care. Like Tyreek Hill still, he's a top 6 dynasty wide receiver for me because I get 3 years of this. Like I don't. You think I care? He's retiring in 2+ years? No, I really don't. So this is more what I want to hit on, and why I view this stuff as so important to me. Because realistically, like this stuff matters, and I know we kind of struggle with it. But it's nice to like bring that to get people like new eyes on it. So like, we're trying to shift people's brains a little bit to be like, oh yeah, because for instance, one of my guys in this league, he has a team of Brandon Ayuk, he has Devonta Smith, he has Jonathan Taylor, he has Trevor Lawrence, he has a lot of these young guys, But realistically, like his team's stuck in this perpetual like in between because he doesn't have the truly elite difference makers. He has a lot of decent young players, but if you don't have those hammers, like you're just kind of stuck. And that's the thing we kind of need to think about is like, how do we shift that? Because there legit needs to be a happy medium. Obviously, you can, you go young, you get all the draft picks, and maybe you get those true difference makers. Maybe you hit on A-Chain, maybe you hit on Gibbs or Bijan. But even so, like Gibbs or Bijan, they haven't been the guys we thought they were going to be. This wide receiver rookie class this year has been all over the place. The 2 most valuable dynasty rookie wide receivers are Tank Dell and Puka Nacua. Nobody, I'm going to go back to like March, April. Nobody was talking about those guys. Like there was little crickets. Like we got a Puka blur, or not Puka, we got a Tank blur right on Senior Bowl where the corner said they did not want to guard him. He was terrifying to guard. Like they could not guard him. You notice that? Like that's translated to the NFL rather quickly. But because he was small, he's undersized, he's older, people just didn't want him. I got him multiple times in the 4th round of my dynasty leagues. I have him in my home league. Fun story is after week 1 or whatever Dobbins got hurt, I offered him straight up. I was like, here, I'll give you Tank Dell for Dobbins. I did not expect this from Tank Dell, right? The guy declined it. Thank you to you, dude. I appreciate you, Anthony. Salute to you, my friend. You saved my team. Now I got Tank Dell. We ride with Tank Dell. You know what I'm saying? I had another guy in this actually Thunderdome league, which this league is right here, offered me Tony Pollard, and I said I prefer Tank Dell straight up. Why would I do this for Tony Dell? He was like, because he was trying to get a pick on top, and I was like, bro, you got it flipped. Like Tony Pollard does not have any security. He's older. He's going to be a free agent after this year. Where's he going to end up? Like, I have Tank Dell on a rookie contract tied to CJ Stroud. He's the best wide receiver in that room. This is like I'm getting the Marvin Harrison Jr. Peyton Manning vibes. Obviously, I'm not saying he's Marvin Harrison, but like you're getting those type of vibes, right? Or Reggie Wayne, you get like that guy tied to the elite quarterback. It's wheels up. Like this is the thing where obviously if you hit on those rookies and they just come out of the gate and they just slug and say the Puka Nacua, who I kind of think is undervalued now, but you get those difference makers young. Obviously, they make a world difference, but that doesn't mean we should discount solely swinging for those guys in the 3rd and 4th rounds because it's not going to be a great hit rate, right? That's just more seems like the outlier case. Because, for instance, I have Mike Evans in this league. I don't have Keenan, unfortunately, but I do have Mike Evans in this league. I'll try to trade Mike Evans to get a mid-second round pick. Like I really like the guys in that range, right? People were like, "Nope, I want you to add a second to Mike Evans." I was like, "Bro, what are you talking about? Like Mike Evans is still a good wide receiver." People are like, "Nope, he's old because he reached that age threshold, right?" And that's the thing you need to. So yeah, like in this league, I have Travis Kelce. I have Mike Evans. Who else is on my team in this league? Let's see. I'll look it up. I have Saquon. You know, I have Deebo Samuel. These guys that really don't hold immense value anymore, but they're just good players. And then we're solidified with Patrick Mahomes. We got Tank Dell. We had Kirk Cousins, who was a brutal loss, but we went and picked up Josh Dobbs. And totally fine. Like, would have made a trade where I got CD Lamb, flipped Olave, and won for Lamb and a 2, basically. And I was like, yeah, cool, that works for me. I'm fine with that. I'm defending champ. We're trying to go back to another championship. So I'm fine going to get these true difference makers, right? So I have a few of those elite difference makers on my team. Like, yeah, I'm all aboard this trade. If you realize if you have 4 or 5 and like a start 10 or start 11, that's literally half your lineup. That's bringing the hammer. So you have to be like, okay, I don't need all of these elite players. You just need guys you plug in here or there. And then you have a Jerome Ford, and then you hit on, like we're talking about Take Dell right there, or Puka Nakua, or whoever it is. Like, you have Raheem Mostert on one of the teams like that. And you get these guys where the value's not there, but the production is friggin' there, and it's gonna be ride with them. So this is kind of like the interesting shift we're seeing. And sorry, I kind of got a tangent there, but I'm gonna jump down. Like, we'll look at these. So these guys are tiered, interestingly enough, by like warp. So you see, there's the 5 truly elite guys that are hitting that. I think it's like 1.5 warp or above. You see that? And then it's basically 1 warp or above. So there's these tiers where it's called league breakers. So if you have Jalen Hurts, you have Josh Allen, Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, Keenan Allen, if you're starting those guys on your lineup, your team is so smashing. You're absolutely smashing. Now we get down this next tier, as mentioned, CeeDee Lamb. If you have Dak Prescott, who's been on an absolute tear, CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert, Sam Howell, Patrick Mahomes, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You notice there's a lot of wide receivers in here, right? AJ Brown, then we got Tua, Lamar Jackson, Raheem Mostert, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff. Because this is 6-point passing, you see how those guys are in there. You'll notice these trade values in Keep Trade Cut are massively different. Sam Howell is only 4,800. Stephon Diggs is 5,200. Jordan Love, 4,400. By the way, Jordan Love has caught fire recently. I'm not sure how to treat him, honestly. I think you could, like, his late 1 value is fine with me. It's where that's basically what his range is. Some people are going to pay it, some aren't. We talked about this numerous times, but getting him, the problem is he plays Kansas City this week, so you might want to wait, let his value come down after he plays Kansas City. If he goes off against Kansas City, then, he takes off. Good for him. But it's kind of just a risk-reward situation for him. You'll see Lamar Jackson. He's been a little bit of a letdown, but he's there. He's like QB8. And then we got right here, we got Mike Evans, Travis Etienne, and he goes on a list. And it gives you these guys, and it's tiering them for you. It's putting them in groups. Like, excuse me, I can't clear my throat. And then there's guys you keep going farther and farther down. But it's fun to see. So if you look at the warp, and this guy's all the way up here with no value, and then it's up on this side, it's all Keep Trade Cut value. So if someone was down here, Justin Jefferson right there at 0.6. Right? But you can find guys that are really cheap. Raheem Mostert, Zach Moss, who, by the way, Zach Moss is about to be a league winner. So I kind of wanted, this is the whole impetus for this, is talking about Zach Moss. So let me bust out trade calculator because I want to bust that out in this league. Yeah, Zach Moss, like this is the thing. So we're going to shift the share tool to this one. All right. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about, we're going to go to Zach Moss real quick right here. So Zach Moss, 1,900 keep trade cut value. Literally just worth nothing. It's like mid-third, give or take. We'll just put the third here. Let's see what they say. I'm assuming it's like a mid-third. Yeah, that's basically what it is. It's a mid-third value for Zach Moss. That's where he's at. It's going to go up. You're probably going to have to pay an early third or a late second to get Zach Moss. If I'm paying that value for him. If you want another guy that's going to be a difference maker, a hammer going into the playoffs and possibly throughout the playoffs, like this is why having these guys who are quote-unquote backup bell cows, there's not very many of them. But if you get your hands on them, they're so important because an injury goes down. This happened to my home league guy, Zach Moss. He's just chilling on the bench. I wasn't going to play him. But guess what? The guy who's in second place in our division, he loses Jonathan Taylor. And guess what? I have Zach Moss. I'm a contender. Am I going to sell Zach Moss? No, I am not. I'm riding that production. If you're on the flip side, if you don't need Zach Moss, go flip him for a second. Or go flip him for a young player that's underproducing. Someone like Jahan Dotson comes to mind. You get Jahan Dotson. People really don't want Jahan Dotson. He hasn't been very good this year, but he's still a good wide receiver. Christian Watson, another guy. Like, you could go flip him for Christian Watson. Go get Christian Watson. You know what I mean? Like, you go make these moves if you're rebuilding. Like, what does Zach Moss do on our team? He doesn't serve a purpose. Could he be a starter next year? Sure, he could be. We don't know how it's going to work out. Seems like Indianapolis likes him. They might keep him in there because we've seen without Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, that running back room is rough. We thought Deion Jackson was going to be a thing, not so much. But realistically, it's like Zach Moss's value. It's not very much. So we're gonna click on Zach Moss. You see how his fantasy points, like he's had some very good weeks. He's had a 14, a 33, he's had a 22, he had a 20. Like he's been doing very good for teams this year. Like this is the thing with Zach Moss. Like getting him on your roster to go into the playoffs, it's funny. Yeah, he's unrestricted free agent. He's making no dough. Somebody can sign him. Like you can take that risk and you can ride with him. But like realistically, like why not just move Zach Moss? Here's the overall Jason players, running backs: Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, Ty Chandler. A lot of these guys just don't hold. Gardner Minshew. There's a fun trade if you have Gardner Minshew, you don't need him. Flip Gardner Minshew for him. Here's his trade market. He has 113 trades the past week. Obviously, his trade values are down. But like interestingly enough, look at this trade: Christian Kirk plus Zach Moss gives you Sam Howell. Like ideally, I'm just gonna ride with Sam Howell there. Christian Kirk's been fine. There's another one where today Zach Moss has had the inflated value, right? Look at those deals. Zach Moss plus Raheem Mostert gets you T. Higgins. Yeah, T. Higgins. Hello. Zach Moss for a second. Zach Moss for a second and a fourth. Zach Moss for a second and 2/3. Like a lot of these, I bet you a lot of these teams are Jonathan Taylor teams going out and paying the price for Zach Moss. Now, if you really say if you want to just go get him, you could go get him from. So you keep him out of the Taylor manager's hands and go do it. What I like is these are actual trades, so we're gonna Moss. We'll put him back in here, and we're gonna search all the trades, and we're gonna go through a little bit further down. So 8 days. Whoa, hold on. I'm gonna go back to this one. The Jacob deal. I don't understand this deal at all. Some of these values are really strange, but these are actual deals in sleeper. So like these are nice to see. These are see what people are paying. We have a Zach Moss for Tutu Atwell. Why would you even make this move? Like I don't. What's the upside of trading Zach Moss for Tutu Atwell? What do you get from Tutu Atwell? Like I get it. Like Cooper Kupp struggled, but like he's the wide receiver 3 there. That's just it just doesn't do much for you. Obviously, he's a smaller piece in some bigger deals. Like this one's a sheesh. The Jalen Warren trade's just wow. But here's a Zach Moss with 2 seconds for Josh Jacobs. That's pretty bonkers. We keep going 10 days ago. We're getting a little well past the value spike on him, so we'll move back on that. But I just wanted to show you guys kind of war and how we're looking at this. Let's share this tab again. We're going to bust out StreamYard. And to give you, as a manager, like a different way of looking at this, right? Because these guys all hold serious values. And this is more where I'm looking at the data and diving into it. And this is what I see. And this is what this tells me. So if you just go to dynasty daddy.com, you look it up, you'll see this stuff right here. And you can do as however many leagues in. If you're in 100 leagues, it'll have all your leagues for you. You can look through and go through it. If you're in a couple leagues, same thing. You look through it. It's really helpful. It's really useful. I'm going to show you how I sign in on there. So let me pull it up really quick. It's this one right here. Let's go home really quick. I'll show you guys. So you go to the home screen. All you have to do is let's get started right here. You can do, there's the club you want to join. There's Sleeper. Here is my fantasy league. Fully Faker. You can even do ESPN for redraft and FFPC, right? So it has all of them. Like this is great. You sign in, usernames right here. Put the year that you want to look. Bang, sign in. It gives you all your leagues. I got 22 dynasty leagues in here, so I want to keep track. All right, so let's go to this league, right? You could look at power rankings, or you could look at power rankings is pretty cool. I have a very old team in this league. As you can see, 19-5, right there. Raw Dog West, he's like rebuilding. They're another frisky. Anthony's team is a contender. Like they're just fantastic. They are a very good young team. They are terrifying. But this is a 3-headed race. It is myself, Anthony D. We have Layman, the grumpy old man, and Bizarro Jerry, another contender. But these guys don't have near enough its values up. So like here's the other contender. You see where his strength is, wide receiver. The other guy, Jaron, a lot of strength of wide receiver. My team, you can see draft capital. It is actually pretty heavy with running backs, quarterback a little bit. So I have a lot more quarterback value than those teams. This dude's got a ton of draft capital. He's a contender. This is why I struggle. So, but it's good just to give you an idea. And you could go your overall rank, your starter rank, where they stand up, your quarterback rank, you short rank, draft rank, and look at this. This is one of my win now teams, right? I have teams on the flip side, but it gives you a good idea of a way of looking at leagues and shaking it up for you. Now, obviously, you go standings, playoff calculator. This is actually pretty fun, and this is what I like. So go check out your team. If you're not a top 2 team, really what you're trying to do in Dynasty is get into that top 2 spot. If you want to buy, they can do ELO adjusted for you, but it really shows you options to get a first round buy. The reason I'm a 2 spot, so I'm basically on the outside looking in for a first round buy. Realistically, though, I have a decent shot because I'm a highest scored point. I have the most points scored in this league by far. So I have like an extra 150 points scored of anybody. That's why I'm up with these three. Because the record's close. I had just a couple down weeks is what it is. But you look and you see your first round bye, your win division, just odds to win the final. So like there is a big three. And the fourth guy is Layman. He's just team on the struggle bus. He just lost Jonathan Taylor. It's going to be very difficult for him. He's the one that traded Jonathan Taylor plus the first to get ETN, Russell Wilson, deals like this. But like I like looking at this because this gives you a shot. Now, if you want to go to ELO adjusted starters by ADP, then you can go to games, your options of winning, and you can see like this is obviously it's projecting for you. So it's not perfect, but it gives you a good idea, right? You can see contenders, big guys, big favorites in a lot of these, right? So you go through, and this is one of the weird leagues where it's heavily favored favorites and a lot of just guys that aren't. But grumpy old man, eventual powerhouse. You can see like some of these matchups are a lot closer. And then we have right here, we have a big matchup right here. Me and Brett. There, that one. And then there's other ones you just get to look at these, and this is playoffs. Like this is how this shakes out. So it's really cool way of looking at your leagues. And what I liked is the playoff calculator is that tells you how close you are to really get. If you have like a 60% chance of getting a bye or 50%, you make the move and you go get that right. If you're not going to get a buy, it might not be worth to go all in, and that gets to the dynasty strategy. But what I like the war so much about is this gives you players to target and players to find, right? So let's go to the rate war value trade chart. Actually, let's go war. So like this is guys with the most war, right? So you look how the league scoring is here. As you can see, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, same guys are here. TJ Hawkinson. A lot of these leagues are very similar scoring, so a lot of these guys is very much. You can see how it shifts league breakers, elite players. There's guys up there, then it drops down. But it gives you a good idea. And then if you wanted to bust up the trade value chart to find players that are undervalued, you go there, right? And this is where we get back to this chart, right? On the right hand side. So you find guys that you kind of trail off down here in this middle range. So you got Mahoster, you got Jacoby Myers, you got Cortland Sutton, you got Gus Edwards, Zach Moss, a lot of guys in this range. So it's not about picking a particular player. You just go find a rebuilding team that has these guys, and you offer for Gus Edwards, you offer for Zach Moss, right? You offer for Raheem Mostert, who, by the way, this team is dumpster fire, and they won't trade Raheem Mostert. Don't ask me why. I don't know. Don't get into that with me. But it gives you players who just hold less value and keep trade cut, right? So you use that to your advantage. You're like, okay, well, this guy's been one of the better players in the league. Go get him. So as opposed to spending way up for, Bijan Robinson, he's going to cost a ton to get to. You just go get Raheem Mostert. Like, this is a different way of playing, right? So you're like, oh, he doesn't cost as much. It's really fun. I actually just love it. Like, it shifts how you look at Dynasty because you're like, these guys are the true impact players, and this is what you want because you want to look at your lineup and you're like, who gives me an advantage? And obviously, the amount of teams in the league and the amount of players that are starting in the league, that all makes a difference. So, like, if it's start 10, if it's 12-team league, boom, 120 players are starting. How many players in your lineup are making a true impact, right? So, say you have McCaffrey, say you have Hill. So, you have two players right out of the gate that are truly elite difference makers right here. I have two of those guys. And you look down, you're like, you go to the next year, I have Mike Evans. That's another guy he's giving me an advantage. You're like, I have Patrick Mahomes or, one of those elite quarterbacks. And then you start breaking it down and you're like, okay, where's the weak spot on my roster? Who has that position? Like, who doesn't cost as much? And obviously you can do this without using Dynasty Daddy. Yeah, just like because Dynasty Daddy gives you calculated odd, gives you numbers, and it just gives you a little bit more info. So obviously you can go look at leagues individually and like cipher through rosters, but realistically, you just type in the information that pops up there for you. So like that's why I enjoy using that. Obviously, it gets a little more complicated if you're in 20 plus leagues like myself, or like some people are in 50 leagues. It's a lot more complicated. But if you want to look up an individual player, it tells you which team has those players. So if you want to go get 5 shares over Raheem Mostert, right? You just click the league. You're like, all right, he's in this league. Go send trade off. Like there's ways to do it, but it's a good way of looking at it and kind of shifting how we go about Dynasty, right? Because we all know what we like. We all want to win the championships. Like that's what this is all coming about. Some teams, they prefer to go what we call, they like to win trades. Like I like to do trades that make my team better in the short and in the long term. I don't care. I might lose a trade value for now, but in 6 months, that trade looks great down the road because maybe I'm seeing something with a player. I'm looking at the data. You're like, oh, he's playing Puka Nacua. He's like outside the top 20 right now in Dynasty value. But he's still 29% target share. Like he's seeing these elite, like he's seeing all the data, he's seeing all the targets. So like, why is he dropping in price? Maybe I go make a value move for him as opposed to paying up for, someone who holds that elite value, one of those young wide receivers, like Chris Olave. Like would you rather get Chris Olave or would you rather get Puka Nacua? Like, honestly, I'd rather get the guy making a difference, making points in my roster. Like, I'm going to go get Puka, even though he's quote unquote doesn't cost as much, right? So it's just all about doing that and determining what works the best for your team, seeing who has these players. Obviously, it's a little easier in Dynasty and redraft. It's a little bit harder because everyone's still trying to compete. So you have to go like doing the overpay just because it's harder to trade and redraft. You don't have the draft picks, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at your league from basically macro perspective instead of individual, you zoom out a little bit and you're like, okay, who has all of these players? Like, what teams have the elite tight ends? Does anybody have an extra tight end they can get rid of? Or if or you're like, I need a RB2, right? You're like, I need an impact RB2. Like, okay, who's got the most depth? You go back to the chart on Dynasty Daddy where it shows you like this team has the most value at running back. You go to that team, you find a player, like, oh, cool. You're like, yeah, they have Raheem Mostert just chilling on their bench. All right, make it out for him. Like, so it's really easy to use and make your team better. So like it's become my staple. Like I just always check it, I always use it. I go through it. It's like it's just an easy way. It keeps it all centered for me. I don't have to, go to 5 different websites. I don't have to go to 5 different platforms, go to Yahoo or go to My Fantasy League or all these other places, right? It's so good. And then when you get into the individual data, when you look at the WAR, which is the guys that are actually making the biggest impact, and you're like, okay, and that's what we're looking at with WAR per game, right? We're like, oh yeah, like Zach Moss. Why is he so cheap, right? Well, because he was behind Taylor, he wasn't getting any snaps. All of a sudden, he's going to spike. The thing with guys that see the value spike, and you really want to hit it like right away before the true value spike takes in, because people take a while to adjust with trades. Like it takes them a few days before they're fully like, oh yeah, by the way, this guy's going to see all this data. He's going to see all these snaps, right? So once that news breaks like it did today, you immediately go offer for Zach Moss, like right out of the gate. Like, cool, go send a second round pick for him right away. Like you do that deal because if you wait too long, somebody's gonna be like, you know what? Actually, like I want more. So you want to always be proactive with these. You don't want to be reactive because if you're reactive, you're going to be behind, losing value, losing trade. It's just hard to get it done. So this is what I really wanted to talk about this week because as you can see here, like it's just right there, all in front of your eyes. We can get rid of the wins row replacement. We'll just go trade value chart right here with the wins row replacement. So, like for instance, you see the most valuable positions, who scores the most points. Obviously, there's a ton of wide receivers up top, right? These wide receivers, because this PPR league, right? And these wide receivers have been a lot more effective than the running backs. There's one running back standing above the rest. You see the difference he makes? It's Christian McCaffrey. Good luck getting your hands on Christian McCaffrey at this time of year. We are in full win now mode, and he's been probably the biggest impactful player in fantasy this year. So it's really tough to get McCaffrey. So you have to go look other ways if you need to run. If you need a wide receiver, you just pick and choose. You're like, all right, cool. Here's Keenan Allen. Here's Stephon Diggs. Here's Mike Evans, a little bit more expensive. Tyreek Hill. Then you get into these guys on here where it's like Puka Nacua, Brandon Ayuk, right? Jordan Addison. You find, and it's a little more clustered. So it's a little bit different. As you can see, quarterbacks, really this league is kind of depresses quarterback scoring. Josh Allen, you notice how it's 0.83 warp here. On the last league I was looking at, it was basically 2 warp. It's because the touchdowns, I think this is 5 touchdown scoring league. So they don't have to like it was a boost, but they still make an impact for you. So that's why you won't see these quarterbacks up here because the scoring is different. And this is what I mean. We're knowing what your league is. Higher league makes difference because, and it's also 1 QB at the moment too. So this is the bigger problem with this league too. We're shifting Superflex in this league in 2025, but we have the in-between years. We have this year and the next year, so it's kind of all over the place. And then you can see tight ends. Tight ends are a little bit more valuable. You have TJ Hawkinson a little bit more, right? So the individual league values, like this is what we talk about. We can give wholesale suggestions and wholesale, like, all right, go get this slide. Well, all right, how much is he actually? What's his value in that league? I think Ward does a great job of capturing that on individual leagues because that's important. Because in some leagues you have 2 tight end like premium, right? Like that's a ginormous boost. Those elite guys are worth the moon. Like if you get your hands on a Kelsey or that younger tier dudes where you're talking about not Andrews, but like, McBride or Laporta or any one of those young bucks who looks really good, like the cost of those guys is basically unattainable in those type of leagues. So it's really hard to get them. So you have to maybe pivot and go get an older guy like someone, David Njoku, right? So if we go look at WAR, for instance, I'll pull Njoku's name down here. You type his name in right here. Njoku, worth a heck of a lot less. 0.2, like basically 0.36. So we're looking at WAR. He's like right in this range. And you just look for the tight ends. Orchard Blue, it's probably like right. That's Mayer. Ooh, that's a little too low. There's Goddard. Ferguson, like he's in this range, right? Schultz, Ingram, he's probably like right. Yeah. So like he's not worth that much. And the war is cheaper, but realistically, if you're just looking for someone to fill in if you're injured, like you go into this range of tight ends and you just fire out 5 different offers to those teams. Like that's what you do because there's not really a difference in warp. It's just keep shake up value. So like these guys hold a little more value in certain leagues than others. So like you have clusters of players, and this is what I like to look at. This cluster of players right here, right? Like there's a ton of wide receivers in the same range. So it's like why go after one guy when you could just attack a group of players, all really giving you the similar production. You just find the cheapest version. So you just send up 5 similar offers, the same offers, all play those. So maybe one of those guys takes your offer. There you go, good to go. Because you're not really going after the truly different. You're not going all the way up to Tyreek, right? You're paying up for Tyreek, and I mean it's tough to get Keenan Allen right now, but he's still really undervalued in Dynasty compared to Tyreek Hill, right? And the production pretty dang similar. So like this is what you have to decide. You're like, like what does it cost to get Keenan Allen? What does it cost to get Mike Evans? Obviously, Keenan Allen's been better. He's going to continually be better. So is either one of those guys going to be like cost you a 1 in the league? No. So all right, just go get the cheaper one, right? Like that's what I'm talking about. Obviously, Keenan Allen in this league, I definitely like Keenan Allen. He's just been a better player. So like you use the data on top of like what we already know and like what we know about these players, and you just integrate it into your process. You're like, all right, cool. There's this grouping of like 6 tight ends or 6 quarterbacks or whatever it is. Like you use that and you make your team better. And you go, hey, guess what? All right, and this is where it becomes you just become player agnostic, really, and you have a grouping of players where you're like, oh man, I really want Bijan. You're like, well, do you? It's like, or you just go after those 4 running backs in that range, right? Like, does it matter? Not particularly. The only thing that really matters is the value. So at this time of year, value is not as important. We're really getting the championship, so you see value changes, particularly towards these older players. So it's like, all right, if you're not competitive, yeah, then go get guys that are underperforming or injured or young, and like they'll hold the value through the offseason. Because once championship is over, those old guys, that value's gone. So like that's the decision you have to make. You're like, okay, and then you're going to be stuck with the case of playing Mike Evans, where you can't. Sometimes like some of these won't even give you second for him. So you're just sitting there like, oh, this dude's killing me. But come back September in the offseason, right after you go next year, you're like, oh great, I got him starting line. So this is kind of the ebb and flow. And it's usually a good time to divide veterans in the offseason because they're so much cheaper. Right now, the younger, underperforming players, they're not as valuable, so you go get those guys. Like this is what we're talking about with someone like Jahan Dotson, or maybe like I know Jordan Addison's values like it was wide receiver 10 last week, and I didn't understand that. He was not going near those prices, so you're like, all right, what? Like, what are we talking about here? He's obviously gonna drop in value because coming back, Justin Jefferson, like so you just play these games with it. You find little micro edges and you go shop here. You're like, all right, he's cheaper this week. We'll this week, and then I'm gonna sell him next week for a lower. Like this was Dynasty is. Dynasty is day trading. Like it's legit just day trading. That's all it is. If you have an active league, you can make 5 to 10 moves in one day sometimes. Like that's why we love it, because we're just Dynasty degenerates. We're like, all right, cool. I want to make a move in this league, or make it's just fun. We love trading, right? And obviously, you should be gaining a little bit with each trade, and not just trading the trade, but as long as that trade makes your team better or it hits a goal for you, and like determine what your goal is and go attack it, because we have 2 weeks to do it, folks. Like we're going to run out of time. Before you know it, playoffs are going to be here, and a lot of leagues unfortunately have the trade deadline, so you got to make those moves now because you're running out of time. And contenders have usually already kind of certified their rosters at this point, where it's like, all right, we made our moves, we're making the push, or if they haven't, there's 1 or maybe 2 moves left for them to make. So you have to assess your league, see where those edges are and where you can get the most value. And that's where war comes in. Like, that's why I love war. It's like, all right, who's been the best players this season? You look at the scoring, and then it just gives you a spreadsheet of lists, right? So you just pull it up, and you just look right here. It's right there. It's literally just staring you right in front of the face. You go down the list, it's like, all right, cool, these guys, and it literally tiers them for you. All right, these are the league breakers. Can I get my hands on any of those guys? Nope, let's go down. All right, who's the cheapest out of this elite tier? Because all these guys are a lot of the same. Like, and obviously, is Jamar Chase really going to give you that production to these other guys? No, he's not. Not with this situation, right? So, is it really worth paying for Chase when you just pay for Amon-Ra? No, like just go get CeeDee Lamb or Amon-Ra. They don't cost near as much, and like the values are starting to merge. You're seeing Chase really gain or lose steam to someone like Lamb. But like realistically, you could just get those guys that are going to outproduce him. Or if you want the old dudes, you just go get the Mike Evans. Like he's the cheapest version of all these guys, right? So you do that. Then you go on the next year. You're like, all right, I just need a guy that's really good. All right, Kyron Williams. He stepped in. He was the bell cow again. And this is kind of like getting Zach Moss. Same thing. These guys that hold no dynasty value, they really are just cheap year-to-year fill-ins. You go get the cheapest version of those guys. You plug them in, and you just keep doing this, right? So instead of paying the premium for one guy, unless you want to play the value game, you do that. This is just, it's right there for you to look at. And what I love about it is it's tailored to your individual league. So like we talked about wholesale, you just go to that. So that's what we're going to wrap up this episode on, folks. Like I just wanted to really touch base on the whole value versus production. And this time of year, like production is more important because we're trying to get those championships. That's the most important. That's what this game is all about, winning championships. I know the value game's great. It's nice to have those players, but like it's about getting production into your lineups and winning your, particularly the week 13, the bipocalypse we have coming on, where we have like people losing Jacobs, people losing Adams, people losing Lamar, people losing Dave Flowers, all these players, they're getting sucked out of your lineup. Josh Allen, he's gone. Stephon Diggs is gone this week. So like it's a ton of impactful players. So this is the week where if you don't need Zach Moss, you don't need Kyron Williams, you immediately go sell those guys to a team that's competitive for those. And they'll pay you a hefty sum for them because they're going to need it. Because like teams are making that push to get the playoff bids, or they're making the moves for the buy. So like, go make those moves. Don't be afraid. If you lose, if you play afraid, like this happens all the time. Don't be afraid. Make the moves. Go send out the offers. You live and learn with it, but just be active. That's what it's all about. It's dynasty, folks. So, all right, with that, we're gonna wrap this episode off because I got the wife's home watching my daughter doing dinner. It's a little late dinner, but I'm going to go catch up with the family. So hope you enjoyed this episode of Fantasy Lowdown. Your host, Jesse Moore, a.k.a. JMoore05. You can find me on all the social media platforms, any one of them. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, I guess Snapchat, but Twitter, all of them. So with that, hope you all take care and hope you all have a good week. All right, see you.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.